Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Batwoman, the latest episode of Supergirl, the latest episode of The Walking Dead, as well as the latest episode of Watchmen. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time I'm going to start talking about each of respective shows. So, for example, if you don't want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Batwoman, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Supergirl, or skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Walking Dead, or skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Watchmen. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Batwoman. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode. Let's break it down. Obviously, we're kind of picking up with the whole Sophie knowing Kate's identity, and it's like, okay, so how are we going to handle this? And now it turns into this interesting situation because Luke is like, okay, so are you going to tell her? Do you trust her enough? But at one point in time, Kate wholeheartedly would have told Sophie the truth, but now it's a different situation because it's like, now for her, it's like, not only is she she knows my secret, she's willing to tell my dad. But in Sophie's mind, it's like, if I tell your dad, I'm not doing this to betray you, it's because your dad needs to know, because that way the crows will stop hunting you and potentially hurt you. Plus, he needs to know so he'll convince you to stop doing this, because, Sophie does care about her. And so for Kate, it's like, we have to stop all of this before things go too far with all of that, or her dad, once he finds out, will shut down their entire operation. So there's that whole side of things, because this involves, the main thing they're working on is trying to stop this assassin known as Rifle, which I guess he's supposed to be, kind of maybe he's a little similar to Deadshot, which we know Deadshot exists in his universe, but he's dead, right? I believe, yeah, he's dead in his universe, so that's why they probably couldn't make the pull for making it Deadshot instead. But regardless, maybe that's just using this particular character, Rifle. Maybe that turns into something later on. Maybe it's supposed to point out who he's connected to, but we'll get to that later. But I was like, right. Because the last time we saw Deadshot, he was kind of like a figment of John's imagination, if I remember correctly, because he died like a couple seasons back. Regardless, once again, going on a bit of a tangent, but Kate's trying to stop him, and then all of a sudden this lady gets in the way. I'm like, oh man, don't tell me Gotham's got another hero trying to get in the way. I'm like, okay, rather you shouldn't be trying to stop her. Maybe you should be, it's like, oh, she's trying to stop the bad guy, but it's like, oh, you just want it for the glory. But it turns out, no, lo and behold, this isn't just anybody. She knows who Kate is underneath the mask. It's like, oh, I taught you the moves. And she's like, Julia, and she says Pennyworth. The moment she said that, I had to rewind it. I was like, did she just say Pennyworth? I was like, holy crap, I didn't know Alfred had any kids. This is the first series most Batman canon I've come across. Like, once again, I'm not familiar with the comic books, but most stuff never shows Alfred having a kid, and maybe it did at some point in time. Maybe there's certain continuities that did, and I just don't remember it. Maybe it's just never been the biggest plot point. I mean, because that was always the reason why he cherished like Bruce so much, is because Bruce was like the closest thing he had to having a son of his own. So I'm curious. I'm assuming that's like a biological. I mean, it could be adopted. She could. It could be like an adoption situation, is what I'm trying to say. So, but I'm assuming that's like his birth child. But I mean, whatever the case may be, it doesn't matter anyway. But that's still like crazy to think about it. And the fact that she even trained Kate, that was interesting. But now we find out that Kate, well, for one, it's like Luke is like, oh, Julia, Luke. It's like, well, of course you would know. It's like both of your fathers were the closest people to Bruce Wayne, so of course you two would know each other. So it's almost kind of like in Titans how like Donna and Dick are so close, because Wonder Woman and Bruce Wayne are pretty tight. I mean, it's a Justice League thing, but also like I don't know if they necessarily dated in the Titans continuity, but still it's kind of like that same thing of like, oh yeah, we're kind of sidekicks, so we're familiar with each other. It kind of works in the same way, but you get what I'm trying to say. But the complicated thing is Kate and Julia have history because they actually had a fling together, but that got complicated the moment Kate found out, like, who she really was, because she lied about who she was. She was basically sent by Bruce to be undercover to look after Kate, because it was like after like Kate got kicked out of the military and after her dealing with the whole her and Sophie situation. So it's like, and so now you kind of add more context to why Kate has trust issues. It's like, two different women broke her heart by lying to her. It's enough to kind of break your trust in any regard. So, but the moment Julia popped up, I'm like, okay, that's how Kate's going to get around the whole like Sophie knowing her identity. I mean, because she did try to have a sit down with Sophie and was about to talk to her, but then like the dude at the restaurant was giving them so much shit because it's like, she's like, oh wait, oh, you have a problem because I'm wearing sneakers? That dude over there is wearing sneakers. Oh, is it because we're two women? Oh, is it because I'm gay? It's like, oh, that this guy is, and she makes kind of a big scene out of it, and he's like, no, you can eat her. She's like, you know what, we're kind of done. And that's the sad thing, because for Sophie, she's like, why do you have to kind of turn it into something? And she's like, well, you mean stand up for myself? You know, because that's for her, like, obviously her dad even says of like she can be a little hot-headed and whatnot, but for her it is a thing of like, Kate is very steadfast in her beliefs, and she's like, I'm not going to hide who I am to make anyone else feel better, you know? But the sad thing is, and can we now have more context to understanding it? Because Jacob never had any issues about Kate being gay. It's like, I support her, but obviously the same isn't said about Sophie's mom. You know, the way she's like, the way her mom talks about people who are gay. So it's like, that was her main hang up about it. And I am not surprised. I kept having this inkling. I was like, Jacob had to have something to do with Sophie, not because her and Kate had that moment of like, you know what, we're going to stand together, because Kate was like, they can't kick us both out. We're literally at the top of everyone at this school. So there's no way they're going to kick out their top two people. But you have Jacob coming to Sophie and kind of giving her, you know, perspective. It's kind of how she looked at it, in the sense of like, Kate is going to end up getting kicked out of here. The fact of the matter is, your plan isn't going to work out the way you are. I can't make the choice for you, but you should think about the fact of the matter is, because for Sophie, it's like, because she stayed, because she denied who she was and kind of denied, you know, being gay and everything, it led to her being able to be in the military and allowed her to get money for her family, take care of them. But, you know, it's like, yeah, you were able to gain so much, but you lost me. And it's like, it's that thing of like, I get it. Like, when you put it that way of like, yeah, like so many opportunities were left open for you by not admitting that you're gay. But it's still like, it still sucks, because it's like, because you don't think about the ramifications of what that can have on a person's life. I mean, what that meant for Kate. I mean, you're kind of the reason why she has trust issues when it comes to people. You kind of fed that flame to a certain extent. So, and what was also interesting about it was the whole Tyler thing too, because Tyler was kind of being like, whoa, you had a conversation with Batwoman. Do you know who she really is? But then, you know, afterwards, Sophie ended up coming back and it's like, no, it's not because I know who Batwoman is. It's because me and Kate dated. He's like, whoa. So now, because for him, it's like, because he's like, you make it seem like it was an insignificant thing. It's like, no, that relationship went on for how long? 3 years. That's longer than any relationship I've been in prior to you. So it's like, that wasn't just some fling. That was a significant relationship, and you hit it. For Tyler, it's not even the fact is, oh, you're gay. It's like, obviously that doesn't matter to him, but it's like, you're around your ex again. Your ex is still there. So it's like, for one, it's like, I don't care that you were gay, you had this relationship, whatever. It doesn't matter. We're together, but it's like, you lied about your significant other who you've been hanging around. Of course it's gonna make me feel a bit different, you know. And she's like, and he's basically like, do you have, are things between you and Kate completely gone? And Sophie can't quite answer, and he's like, okay, that's basically, I got my answer. So it's so interesting, because like, this episode was kind of basically everything kind of imploding, because Kate's family is imploding in many different ways, because, well, Catherine and, you know, Jacob are getting divorced. Obviously, Mary's kind of torn, because it's like, well, Mom, you're the only family I have left, because, well, Dad apparently left town for business. Kate's avoiding me because of everything related to you. And, you know, obviously, now Kate's pissed at her dad too, because now she knows her dad was part of the reason her and Sophie broke up, which that's going to be an issue. So like, this family is breaking apart in many different levels. But I think for Mary, because even Mary said it, she was like, me and Kate were starting to be good after 5 years of being sisters. Like, she kind of started letting me in and started kind of trusting me more. And now because of you, all that progress we made is just kind of kaput, you know? And that's the sad thing. Like, because I think, you know, in no shape or form is, I think, Kate trying to take it out on Mary, because she does recognize, because once again, in this series she got introduced to a different side of Mary, of like, oh, the clinic and everything. It showed her a different side. Like, she didn't know, she thought she knew Mary, but it's like, oh, I see that there's more to you. And even, you know, it's probably the complicated thing of like, my issues are with Catherine, not you. It's that type of thing, you know. So, but many different interesting developments. It turns out, obviously, like, that Alice and Mouse were behind this rifle dude, but apparently he works for someone else who Alice doesn't even want the lady's name mentioned. There was the moment he mentioned it, she slapped Rifle and was like, "Don't say her name in front of me." It's like, what the hell is that about? Is it just that, like, she must have maybe she had some kind of connection to what happened to, like, her growing up, maybe? Like, everything with, like, Mouse and his dad, maybe she played a role in that? Or is Alice kind of being like, I'm Queen Bee here? Like, I'm the only, like, almost like the Queen of Hearts, and, like, that's what I was almost thinking too, because I was like, could that be like a Queen of Hearts type of thing? You know, where she's Alice in Wonderland and this other lady is the Queen of Hearts in a sense. So it's like, don't mention that mad queen around me or something. I don't know. Is that a potential route they're going down? Especially with the whole like Alice in Wonderland metaphor that they're going for. But, you know, we'll have to wait and see. But Alice ends up handing over the weapon that can pierce the batsuit, which we still have not gotten confirmation of why Hamilton was working on a weapon like that. Once again, I guess it's like just in case Batman ever got out of line or someone else. I mean, much like I brought up before, maybe they were thinking like Bruce was thinking like, oh, if someone ever got their hands on the batsuit, it could be taken. It needs to be able to be taken down. But it's just interesting that Hamilton came up with that as well. So I'm like. And especially because they stopped once Batman disappeared, but the moment Batwoman popped back up, it's like, I guess because it's like, maybe in this continuity, Batman crossed certain lines, or maybe it's just a thing of like, vigilantes, we can't have vigilantes running rampant. It's like, the fact of the matter is, you might not agree with it, but it's like, you're going to straight up kill who's ever underneath that suit? That's nuts. And obviously, like, you know, there's the whole thing with Sophie. I like the realization where she was trying to, you know, try to talk to Batwoman, being like, yeah, I know it's you, Kate. The fact of the matter is, I know you think I betrayed you, but I'm doing this because I want to protect you. And she's like, Sophie? And she's like, wait, what? So, what? You're not Batwoman? So, I like that. But then, you know, Julia inside the bat suit got blasted. And the moment it didn't kill her, because even Kate was like, why didn't it kill you? It was meant to pierce the bat suit. I'm like, Alice. I was like, oh, she might want to pretend like Beth isn't there anymore, especially around Mouse, because he gets super jealous about the whole thing. But it's like, you're still there, you still care about your sister, because the end game is what she said before. She still wants. I wonder, would he be okay with that? I mean, I'm sure word had to get back to him, or maybe she was kind of like, well, she had said it last episode of like, at first, we're not going to kill her, we're just going to try to persuade her to join her side. If not, then we kill her. But besides, this was someone else trying to use the weapon, so for her, I guess it's like, I'm not going to give someone else the pleasure of killing my sister. Like, we still got more of our game to play before it potentially comes down to that. But I think even when given a choice, I don't think she can kill Kate. I think just a part of her that won't. Because despite the issues that they have of, like, their connection dying, it's like, that's still your sister regardless. So that twin connection, I think, is still just as strong, you know? And I think you're not willing to kill someone who's basically kind of like your other half, you know? So, like I said, we'll see. I also like we have a reference to Argus in this episode, because it's like, oh, they're trying to track the weapon. It's like, yeah, we got some equipment from Argus. I'm like, yay! Because now we're making references to like every other places in Arrowverse. Obviously, because, you know, like Argus is mainly an Arrow thing, but it's obviously popped up in Flash and Legends of Tomorrow. So it's just kind of neat to kind of like reference other stuff in Arrowverse. I don't know why. I get giddy about little references like that. I'm like regardless. Which, speaking of referencing the Arrowverse, I thought was kind of interesting, because what did Kate say? She was like, yeah, the fact of the matter is, Bruce, you held at fault in the shadows and stuff like that by yourself, which that's an interesting line of dialogue, especially because Julia even says it later on, the whole thing of like the only people that Bruce had in his corner were Lucius and Alfred, which makes you go, so none of the Bat family exists in this continuity. No Robin, whether it be Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, Damian Wayne, which obviously because of the whole Talia thing, because Talia exists in the Arrowverse and doesn't appear to have a child, you're kind of like, okay, so Damian definitely isn't a thing in this continuity, but no Robin, no Batgirl or anything. I'm like, now that's really fascinating. That really kind of makes you go, huh? So that makes you wonder, Commissioner Gordon had to potentially exist in this continuity, but maybe his daughter just never picked up the mantle. It's like, so like, she's actually Kate it seems like in this continuity, is the first one to pick up the mantle, like, of the Bat family. Like, she's the first of the extended Bat family. I'm like, that's really interesting. That's pretty dope, actually. So I just thought that was kind of, like, fascinating, because I kept bringing it up every time. I was like, so what's the status of, like, the rest of the Bat family? It's like, nah, it seems like and I think that fits nicely, too, with the whole why Bruce ended up leaving, because it's like, it's not like he had anyone else he could rely on. He was literally doing all this by himself, at least out there. Like, obviously he had Lucius and eventually Luke and Alfred, which I am curious what, well, because kind of about to say, we don't know what Alfred's situation is in this continuity. Like, did he leave? Did he pass away? Because we know Lucius was killed. Did Alfred pass away at old age or something? Because Julia didn't bring it up. Which begs the question, what organization is she with? That she's able to, maybe it's kind of like I would assume it's like some kind of like mercenary / spy organization. I mean, her dad did have like ties to, the military, at least, I'm only obviously just basing that off of the little bit I've known about Alfred, but mainly because of Pennyworth, and Gotham as well, kind of referencing his military history, but regardless, I just thought that was all kind of fascinating. I also thought it was pretty dope when Kate goes to rescue Julia, who has kind of been knocked out by the weapon. Her with a single bullet flattens the vehicle. I also like the fact that she kicks some ass. I thought it was kind of pretty dope too, because it's like, all right, you're wearing the bike mask, so it's not like anyone's going to know it's you. Obviously Sophie did, because of like how far range she shot, which I'm like, and even Sophie had talked about the fact is like Kate was super drunk, like she had a hangover from like the night before. It's like, oh, I'm surprised anyone would give her a gun under the circumstances of her getting like a sharp shooting medal, and she got in the top of the glass. I'm like, holy shit, she's really good. Like her, I mean, I think that's probably why the batarangs are probably came a little natural to her in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, once the weight was adjusted, it probably came natural to her, because probably aiming stuff like that probably is just something, probably the calculations needed to kind of adjust for wind and stuff like that is something she's already used to. I'm like, that's actually super dope. Kind of wondering, it seems like she does the calculations because she's already done that military-wise to a certain extent. So I was like, that's actually pretty dope. Which kind of makes me wonder, if you put her up against Oliver when it comes to, accuracy like that, I think she might give Oliver a run for his money when it comes to that. It kind of makes me think about that. I'd actually really like to see what they would do, in a situation like that, but regardless. So there's that. There's also this interesting other thing of, Catherine trying to, bridge the gap between her and Jacob. And even I was kind of caught off guard. I'm like, that's interesting. Despite all your differences, you're kind of letting that happen. I was like, I thought because he was going to eventually let her get close and then go off on her or something like that. But it's like, no, because we get the twist at the end when it's like, Jacob's like, yeah, I'm on my way back. And it's like, wow. I was like, I didn't see that twist coming, that it was, Mouse disguised as Jacob. I was like, now that's pretty interesting. So I guess the whole point is to kind of lure her into a trap, because I guess the whole point, because Alice's main target, I'm sure, is both Jacob and Catherine. Catherine for faking her death and basically making her family give up on her, and Jacob for actually giving up on her. So, because Kate, it's her twin, so it's she was a kid, so I'm not going to hold her as responsible. I hold her too highly responsible, sure, but not to the extent that she does Catherine and Jacob. So I just think that was kind of fascinating. I guess the whole plan is to potentially poison them, because that's what they ended up getting from this whole deal. Which even the dude was like, I hope it's worth it, because you screwed her over, and she doesn't take kindly to that. So I think we haven't seen the last of whoever Rifle works for. I'm sure she's going to come rain hell down upon Gotham, and Alice is going to be the receptive of her wrath, whatever that is, and whatever form that ends up taking, So I'm very interested to see where things kind of go on that front. I was almost halfway expecting, and maybe I feel like out of anyone who's going to find out about her being Batwoman first, it's probably going to be Mary, because Mary came in being like, "Whoa, you got a secret passage? What's up with that?" But then Mary's just kind of like, "Oh, you're just pushing me away and everything." But later on, Kate calls her first, because it's something that I brought up earlier. Julia made a point of I'm not trying to shit on the way Bruce handled things of like keeping to himself. I'm not him. I can't judge him. But the fact of the matter is, living a life like that isn't good. So Kate has to find that balance of not completely putting herself in solitude and just being like you, because it's like, yeah, like the city misses Batman, but they don't miss Bruce Wayne. Like, he was gone for all these years. No one's really cared that much about him being gone. Like, Kate might be the only person that's really shown any interest of like where Bruce has been this entire time, you know? So I think that's kind of fascinating. And so she is going to show herself to kind of not kind of completely cut life out of her normal life. She's going to be Kate, and she's got, you know, Mary helping her opening up a gay bar, especially across from the restaurant that dude, which is so ironic because that guy was like, hey, Batwoman, you can eat a free meal here anytime because you help save the day. You know, the irony behind all of that. But sadly, things between Kate and, you know, Sophie, because for her, she has to end things because it's like, I still love you, and based on what you said to Batwoman, you still feel the same way about me, but it's not fair to either me nor Tyler to kind of basically be in this situation. So what we have to do is, I think what you said before is best. We just kind of stay out of each other's way, and it's like, that's sad, you know? And then you have, you know, Sophie being like, only love you, Tyler, which we know that's not 100% true, but it's the whole thing of like, you know, you got to save your marriage while you can. But the sad thing is, I think now that this is there, like, she's kind of got her doubts about everything because it's like, you know, it's sad because now things are on the other foot, because obviously Kate is very heartbroken after all of this, but you know, so is, you know, Sophie. I mean, Sophie was heartbroken before, but now Tyler knows the truth about their relationship, so that it's probably going to put doubts in his mind about whether he really can believe Sophie about it, just because she's lied so long about her and Kate's relationship. It's sad too because like when that guy was trying to scrub away Kate's like medals and stuff like that, it's like, oh, she doesn't attend this academy anymore. She's like, you can try to erase her, but you can't. Like what she's done, the impact she's had on this academy, like how impressive she is cannot be, her radiance essentially can't be like erased essentially. So she ended up taking that medal, and eventually present day ended up giving back to her. So some silver lining to the situation. It's sad that things kind of ended this way. I think at some point maybe it might come the time where Kate can trust Sophie with that information, but not where things currently stand. So like I said, if anyone's going to be the first one to be told the truth, it's probably going to be Mary, because Mary's her doctor acquaintance, but maybe she'll try to bridge that. But I feel like I'm sure Mary, because she's going to be in that complicated thing of like, well, can I trust Mary? You got this social media following, but at the same time, it's like you've got a lot of depth to you, so you're not just a shallow person that most people might think you are. So regardless of all of that, like I said, a lot of interesting things went down. So I'm very interested to ultimately see where all this ends up leading us going forward into the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Supergirl. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, it's kind of neat in this episode we actually kind of get a better look and better understanding of Leviathan. So it does seem like, I mean, for where things kind of currently stand, it does seem like it is kind of what I thought, where it isn't just like a thing. It does seem like a group, but I mean, maybe there is like maybe there's something more, because we only got like a slight introduction, but we get introduced to Romacon. He's the only one we really get a full-on introduction to, except for the old lady with Sin pop-up. We do know her name is Margot, but then it's like, oh, they start referencing humans, and I'm like, oh, you guys aren't humans. I mean, I guess that would explain how Margot's just like popping in and popping out of places out of nowhere, but it's like, oh, so they're aliens. Turns out they've been here for a very, very, very long time. That's nuts to think about, that basically their ship crashing with the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs. And it is kind of what I thought it was, that they are this group that is trying to protect this Earth because it's become their new home, because their original home was torn apart by war. So I guess for them it's like, oh, these humans, all they've done is, you know, and as I thought, so they're almost like on the level of almost eco-terrorists, that they kind of do catastrophic things to try and keep Mother Nature intact. I mean, since this is DC, I guess we can basically compare them to Poison Ivy, because Poison Ivy borderlines as an eco-terrorist. She goes to extreme measures to make sure that, because she values plant life more than humans, because all humans do is destroy. So that's actually a really good comparison I didn't even think about to just now. So they're basically on Poison Ivy level, because they they basically inhabited his planet before the humans did. So I guess in their mind, they kind of have more of a right and claim to it. So, and it turns out what Brainy ends up looking into, it turns out like a lot of stuff, whether it be the flood, Pompeii, a lot of what is considered natural disasters was actually Romicon, probably just Leviathan in general, shifting the world to kind of bring some sort of balance. Like I thought. But I think it's kind of interesting to know that it isn't just this recent thing. It's something they've been doing for a very, 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 very long time, which I think is great. I mean, not in the sense of what they're doing is great, but just like to know that, like, holy crap, they're probably one of the oldest alien species on this planet. Hence why Romicon is as powerful as he is. I mean, literally, the entire planet is basically his weapon. I mean, a majority of the planet, there's like 70% water, but there's probably like Earth underneath that. That's, the entire planet's basically his weapon. And I love the moment he shows up and we see his powers. I'm like, oh my God, he's earthbending, which I loved it. Brainy's like, oh, earthbender. She's like, earthbender? Wait. I'm like, because my mind immediately went to, because when you see people controlling Earth like that, because Avatar spoiled me. Avatar and Korra spoiled me because that's all I can think of when I see that. When I see someone manipulating water, I think earthbending. So manipulating fire. Pyromancy, yes, but more so than anything, firebending, So it's just that same thing. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. I like that, Brainy went straight to the word earthbending. So I thought that was pretty cool. What I also like is the fact is that Margot visited Lena, but Lena was ready. She even let down, I think, summon down her defenses so they would come and confront her. She's like, oh, I've learned so much about Leviathan. It's like, you don't know, no one can know all there is to know about Leviathan. But even Margot left being like, I couldn't get the, pinned it back because it's like she's a Luther. I love that being a Luther mean it holds so much weight. I mean, to be fair, Lex was the mega ultra super villain that he was, so it shows you it's like they have a lot of smarts and a lot of power and reach. So it's like, don't underestimate the Luthers. They've proven themselves to be something even the Man of Steel has had trouble going up against, so I think that's pretty impressive. It just kind of like shows you a statement of just like how you shouldn't mess with the Luthers, how dangerous the Luthers are, considered even to this ancient alien species, And even Lena putting Kara in this position where it's like, I don't have to worry about like them coming after me. I'll use this to my advantage because I have Supergirl to protect me, which Supergirl shows up to protect her. But I also like because I like that thing of like even Kara's heat vision doesn't work because it puts a hole in his stomach, but he's able to kind of like separate himself because he's basically Rock himself, which I haven't even talked about it. The actor who plays him is Mitch Pileggi, which I'm not that familiar with the X-Files, but I do know enough to be like, he's Fox. He's Mulder and Scully's boss. Which, interesting enough, CW connection wise, he played Mary's father, aka Sam and Dean's grandfather on Supernatural, which is pretty dope. So I was like, oh, that was pretty dope. The actress who's one of the members of Leviathan 2, she looks familiar. Because what we end up finding out, there's at least 5 people that escaped their planet. So we've met at least 3. We've met the lady, we've met Margot, we've met Romicon. So it's like, who are the other 2 and where were they during all of this? And I also like that interesting thing where it seems like Romicon is all like the natural disasters he calls has always been him going brute force. But the lady seems like she's all intent on being technologically advanced, which is interesting because obviously that's a big part of this season because you have Lena representing the tech, you have Andrea and Obsidian representing the tech. I mean, even Kelly, because her therapy is using the tech from Obsidian, and now this alien lady is also being like, oh, let me kind of help you find out where they are because I'm using, because of tech and everything. But regardless, a lot of kind of breaking down all the interesting things, like obviously like Lena is taken to the Fortress of Solitude by Kara for the purposes of trying to find a weapon, because like the only person who has weapons powerful enough to defeat them would be Lex because he's built enough weapons to defeat Kryptonians, so they would need this to fight this dude. And Kara was like, nah, I'd gladly take you. It's so interesting because like a lot of times we never get the full scope of the Fortress of Solitude because it's like this massive hall that they were walking down at first, but like obviously where they were walking past where it kind of gets a little more enclosed is what we typically see. But to see like how massive that is, I guess like I guess I never really taken time to really see the full scale that is the Fortress of Solitude. I thought was actually kind of interesting too, as Romicon could only find him because it's like, oh, where's the one place on Earth? I know where he must have, like, the moment Clark the moment the Fortress of Solitude was made on Earth, he became aware of it because it's the one thing on Earth that doesn't feel like Earth. And as someone who basically feels the Earth, who channels the Earth as power, he'll notice that one area that's different because it's essentially Kryptonian soil. I like how that turns. Well, I'll really quickly talk about it, but I like how that's how Kara ended up fighting him because it's like, oh, like you're able to do all this because you came up through the ground, so the earth is seeping through so you can draw upon it. But she freezes the ground back over and it's like, oh, it's Kryptonian soil. Because whatever it is in earth soil, I guess that might be similar to their planet, allows him to control the earth. But obviously Kryptonian soil is a little different. So anytime he tries to use his power, it didn't work. But he still manages to get away in the end. Once again, it's this whole sad situation, and you have Kara being like, because Kara had expressed this worry to John about the fact is, I was like, hey, the fact is I've been, ever since I told Lena the truth, like I still had this feeling like, something's different. Like the fact is that everything's kind of going to go wrong. Like she was so fearful before she told Lena, and she's now kind of happy that she did, but there's still she felt like almost like the sky was falling, like going to fall, because of this whole Leviathan thing. Like something just made her feel uneasy, and now it's like in the grand scheme of things, we kind of understand why, Lena's leading her on and be like, oh no, it's all good, and keeping up this facade. And then they came across Myriad, which was like, I didn't even think about that. Like Malefic, I was like, okay, Malefic's abilities are close to what Lena's trying to do, but it didn't cross my mind to think of Myriad, because that did take place before she got there, because that was a season 1 thing. Lena didn't pop up in National City until season 2, so I was like, man, I was like, that's going to fit your plan even more so, because she needed a dispersal unit to kind of work, and we've seen how that works on the mind control level, so it literally serves her purposes. And and when they were able to kind of send the home dude off on his own, Kara comes by and is like, whoa, what are you doing, Lena? And she spills the beans. It's like, I've been playing you this entire time. And once again, it's like last episode gave us the context of understanding why Lena is, the way she feels. The fact of the matter is she built up this armor because she was just betrayed by people, her brother, her best friend, and now when that armor was chipped away, Kara gained that trust. But then she told Kara over and over again, it's like, I opened up to you. I told you my one weakness, that my fear was being betrayed. You knew that, and yet you still lied to me. And Kara's like, well, why didn't you come to me, try to let me explain? She's like, explain. For Lena, it didn't matter. It was like, we're beyond explanation. Like, Kara had her reasonings and stuff like that, but at the same time, it's never going to matter, because for her, and it's even something Lena said, it's like, I'm not going to kill you. I'm not a villain. You should have just never treated me like one. And she wasn't trying to. It's just, she tried on so many occasions. Because the thing is, I think even, once again, I don't know if things would end differently if Kara had told her the truth. If Kara had, it's like, I think things are worse because Lena found out in her own right. And it was so interesting, adding the context of even more so why Lena holds so much hatred toward Kara. It's because of you. I killed my brother, which, even that's Kara being like, wait, you killed Lex? Because in her mind, it's like, I'm the one that did it. I had to stop him. But it's like, to know that Lena murdered him is different, Because at least her situation, it was in the heat of battle. She wasn't purposely trying to kill him. She was trying to stop him, and she thought, and indirectly she ended up killing him. But now knowing that Lena purposely found where he was teleported to and murdered him, and for her, it's like, I was trying to protect my best friend. I was trying to protect my friends, and it turns out all of you weren't worth protecting. I killed my brother, I killed my flesh and blood for all of you. For what? For you all to be lying and manipulating me, and it's so sad, and it breaks your heart to see Kara filled with tears, and even Lena's filled with tears because she's so angry and she's so heartbroken, and even she's like, I didn't want to. I could have exposed your secret to the world, but I chose not to because I want you to feel the way I feel, which even, Kara's like, I do. I understand how you're feeling, and it's just, once again, I said it, it's a complicated thing. I get it, but I just wish Lena didn't go about things the way she does. But even Kara's like, don't do this. Don't let your anger at me cause you to go do something drastic, which even she's probably thinking like, what? I might be doing something drastic, but I'm doing it for the sake of the world. It's like, once again, that's logic your brother had, but in her current mind state, she might think, I'm nothing like my brother, and even if I am, I'm going to do good where he did evil. everything Lex did that became the supervillain shit that he did was because, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. He thought he was doing the right thing, and no matter how many people had to be sacrificed for him, what he believed was right trumped everything else. And I think Alina's in that same headspace too. So we see her leave, and just like to know that in that one moment, Kara's entire world came crashing down, because it's like, because it's like, what do you do? Because this is going to be you battling your best friend, And, especially because Kara feels so guilty. So I think she's going to try to speak to Lena, because it's like, no. I put you in this situation. You can come back from this. Don't go down this path too far. Because if you go, there's no coming back from this. So there's that. There's everything with John sensing Malefic, and he goes and contacts his father, which his father is being like, no. What went down with Malefic wasn't for you. It was me. I couldn't handle the situation. You did what you did to save me. Basically, what you did was out of love. And so what happened was my fault, because in his mind, it's like, I'm the father. I should have been strong enough for both of you. And I just wasn't. I kind of broke down, and you saved me as a result. And that ended up with the whole Malefic situation playing out the way it did. But telling John, it's like, Malefic is here in town. The fact of the matter is, you have two choices. You can send him back to the Phantom Zone, or you can try to save him. But doing so might put your life at risk. But by putting my life at risk, I put Malefic in a position where he can be free to come after everyone that I care about. And for John's dad, for Morin, it's like, that's the dilemma. And you feel bad for Morin too, because it's like, that's the dilemma he was in all those years ago. Either lock my son up, or take the chance that his power might hurt everyone, him, John, and all their people. He made his choice, and the fact of the matter is, you basically have to make a choice that you can be at peace with. And Morin brings up the fact is that he never found peace, so he wanted John, despite whatever you do. But for John, it's like, the thing is like, if I open my mind up, he could hurt me and the people I care about, but I can't send him back to the Phantom Zone. That'd be me locking him back up and in prison again, and we just be repeating this cycle. So it's up to John to make that choice. And when the time comes, John, chooses not to send his brother back. It's like, yeah, you could end up using the Phantom Zone projector to send me into the Phantom Zone, which immediately my brain thinks that's what he's going to do. And I thought maybe the whole plan would be Lena has him pretend to be John, and that kind of keeps the DEO and Supergirl off her case. So I thought maybe that was where it was going to go, but it turns out not, because when Malefic looked into his head, he saw the pain that their father was in, to understand why. It gave, I think they're in a very unique situation if they can have this heart-to-heart mentally like that, where sadly, Lena can't see what's in Kara's heart. That she meant no ill will, that she wasn't trying to hurt her, that on many occasions she wanted to tell her the truth, but just couldn't, because she was afraid, because of how you've been hurt in the past. She didn't want to hurt you again. That's why she kept putting it off more and more about her secret, and it's just like, and that ironically ended up being what ends up destroying their relationship. Her fear of not destroying their relationship led to their relationship being destroyed, so maybe this Malefic and John situation can have some effect on Kara and Lena. Maybe it can lead to some heart-to-heart. I'm curious to see, but it seems like Malefic is willing to forgive his brother, because like I said, he understands. I'm like, well, I didn't know that's what was happening. I didn't know father was going through so much, that father felt so, because in his mind it's like, oh, you and dad didn't care, but it's like, no, I see that you cared about me and you were given an impossible choice. And same thing for dad, like he was given an impossible choice. Not unless Malefic's playing a lone game, but it felt like there was some healing in that regard. So I thought that was kind of a beautiful aspect to that. So I'm really interested to ultimately see like where things kind of go down on that path. I mean, I guess Lena doesn't need Malefic anymore. She kind of got what she needed from him, so he can go off with John, whatever the case that may be. So there's that. There's Brainy, who suffered some damage, and it seems like basically, I guess the one way to look at it is his id, using the whole comparison of like Charmed because of the whole Harry situation. Spoilers for this season of Charmed, but it's a whole thing of like, I guess his desires and him being a little more impulsive and stuff like that side of him. It's a little more free now, and it's kind of, which we only got a little taste of it this episode, but he's a little more brash. He's willing to go like, oh, kind of be like, oh, I want to do this, I'm gonna do it type of thing. I don't think we've seen the extreme side of it yet. I think probably going forward we'll probably see the more extreme side, but him kind of explaining like the reason why Leviathan chose the particular spot they did is because I think kind of almost like a ley lines thing of like there's like an energy there that probably makes them stronger, and I think it kind of taps into Brainy a little bit too, like his body just naturally kind of absorbs that energy as well. So, but when they do go there, because of her technology, the lady from Leviathan, she ends up making it so that they can't. It ends up be. I guess it's almost like a. I'm curious how she ended up doing that. I guess she shifted it to make it look like, oh, this is the right. Maybe like she set it up so that like maybe they go to like a portal, like their elevator can take them to a particular portal that sends them somewhere else. So that's at the bottom, but maybe that's like a false. Maybe they're kind of in like a pocket dimension type of thing is what I'm curious about. Whatever the case may be, Alex and Brainy weren't able to find her, so kind of showing what she's capable of. And even the fact is that technology or is that some like magic what she was doing when she opened up that little portal to like almost like a cauldron type of thing of like she spun and like a cloud form to show her like, oh, this is what's going on. So I was like, that seems, but hey, maybe that is technology, maybe that's just her power, which, you know, maybe technology is her power, but you know, we'll see in the long run. So there was that, but there was also another heart to heart in this episode I thought was kind of neat, picking up with the whole like Kelly and Alex thing. I thought was pretty neat of how, you know, when Alex was like, yeah, I got hurt, next time I'll let you know, you see it in Kelly's eyes like, oh, next time. And she basically has to tell Alex the truth. The fact is like, because for her, because Alex is like, you're my home, you know, you've made me realize that you make me feel like I'm at home when I'm with you. And for Kelly, it's like she can't bring herself to let things go too much further because it's like, I care about you deeply, but I've lost someone before under similar circumstances, someone out in the front lines, and I can't lose you. I can't go through that again. So she's trying to break up with Alex, which Alex confronts her later on to go like, the fact of the matter is, you know, I didn't know, because you were trying to be so strong for me, I didn't know how much you were suffering, but the fact of the matter is I wasn't considering your feelings because I didn't know how you were feeling about this, but now I do know we can find a way around this. You know, it's like, because obviously for Kelly, it's like, I don't want you to basically have to choose between me and your career. And that's actually interesting because last season that was a thing for Alex. She didn't. Was that last season or was that season 3? I think it was last season. The whole thing of like being in a situation of having to choose, you know, between wanting to adopt and start a family, because that's been something she wants. She wants to have a child. She wants to have a family. And also being at the DEO, like that was a choice she was kind of stuck between. And I think we're kind of bringing that back full circle to a certain degree. So it's like, she can't, like, the whole thing is like, is she going to be like less out in the field going forward, especially because she did say she wanted to kind of, you know, because like a lot of stuff kind of fell to the wayside, like her wanting to start a family and stuff like that. So it's like, maybe that's going to be kind of like the weight in this situation. What I mean is like, the scale kind of shifts back more with that kind of weighing down more on like the more domestic side of things rather than kind of the leadership side of things. It's going to be interesting to see if she is going to keep that balance, or is the domestic side of things that, you know, starting a family with Kelly and stuff like that, being with Kelly, is that going to hold more weight? I'm curious to see in the long run. I haven't, you know, talked about it, but there was also like the whole Rip Roar situation, which I guess after last episode, well, because we did get introduced to the old man. I forgot about that. So there's number 4. I forgot about the old man. So either Leviathan is the final one, or like I said, or either it's like a Walking Dead thing where it's like, oh, we are Leviathan type of situation. Which begs the question, like, because we saw a whole bunch of people are under their purview, so, well, we know that 5 of their leaders escape. I forgot about that. We know 5 of their leaders escape. We have no idea how many of their people escape. So it's not just alien operatives they have. There's no telling, like, how, I mean, they did say it was like it was enough to wipe out the dinosaurs, so it had to be a pretty big ship that held a lot of people. So that is another thing, too, to think about, that they are aliens that have lived for billions of years, which is incredible to think about. I think you kind of underestimate realizing like how long it is they've been alive. That's crazy. But I'm sure they're the one. I think they probably took Andrea and probably going to force her to be more so, because she wouldn't leave Russell like that, especially for him to be a booby trap like that, which is actually kind of sad for his story to potentially end like that. I mean, to be fair, he was already dead, but I mean, it's not like that makes it any better. It just seems things had a sad ending, and there was definitely no happy ending for that. In fact, the sad ending got even sadder when you think about it. So, because they didn't know that Rip Roar / Russell was dead yet, and obviously they still don't know about the Andrea connection and all of this. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see, ultimately where all this ends up taking us, because everything's kind of coming to a head now that Leviathan has kind of revealed themselves to a certain extent, and also Lena's kind of heading in the direction of fully fulfilling her goal. And I think those two sides, along with Kara, are probably trying to save Lena while also trying to stop her. All of those roads are going to collide at once, and it's going to definitely be interesting to see where that all ends up landing next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of The Walking Dead. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we're picking up where last week's episode left off with Carol and Daryl showing up with a member of the Whisperers. And now it's like, okay, we're going to have to pump him for information, because obviously Carol is going to Lydia trying to find out whatever information she can, because obviously Gabriel's not too happy, because it's like, you put us all in danger. It's like, you went off and did your whole thing, and like because Carol is so fixated on revenge, she wants to make some excuse to be like, oh, this is her, we got to find out about the Horde. It's like, yeah, sure, all that's fine and dandy, but you're doing this more so than anything because you want to get revenge. That's all your mind it's focused on. You're not caring about all the other people. You focus so much on what you've lost that you're not thinking about what else can be lost because of your actions. Because she's so fixated, she believes that she can get away with it all and it can take down Alpha. And so now it's a thing of like, okay, but Lydia tells her, it's like, because obviously Lydia doesn't want more people to die, because it's a complicated thing. Despite hating them, that's still her family. Those are the people she's come to know and love. And so you're asking her to basically help you kill all of them. But it's like, hey, these people are manipulating my mom. My mom gets inside your head, makes you believe believe her lies, believe that she knows what's best for you, that she manipulates you into doing stuff that making you think you want to do it, when in actuality it's just her getting inside your head. And it seems like she's really good at getting inside of people's heads. And so it's like, you show them this, that there's more to this. That's what shifted Lydia, was meeting Henry, him extending a hand, his kindness, and showing that look at what can exist, what can be. And it's like, for a little while, Carol does try that. She gets to do some bread. It's like, oh, want some honey, some jam? It's like, oh, I want everything. Now, part of me wonders, was it 100% BS, or was he actually getting seduced a little bit into be like, holy crap, like, this is real, this is happening, this is everything. And then it's like, okay, so in the grand scheme of things, like, I don't know. The fact is he spit it all back in Carol's face must be like, no, you're not going to get me. Did he kind of sink back into like, no, I got to stand fast in my beliefs, or was he just playing them the entire time? Hard to say in that moment, but that causes Carol to shift up her approach. And I love it, sticking her hand in his wound and everything, putting on her ring, and then pow and punching him like that. It's gnarly to see like Carol so aggressive like that. There's even this moment she had with Lydia where it's like, oh yeah, some makeup, this will help. And Lydia was like, I've had worse. And, Carol's like, I know, me too. And I'm like, right, because she knows, because even from this situation of kind of her mom being as abusive as she was, it's like, Carol can kind of understand, because, her husband was the same way. And I think, because Carol's situation kind of reflects hers a little bit, whereas Carol was like, in Lydia's case, Carol would be her dad, and Alpha would be Carol's husband in that regard. Which the comparison runs even deeper when you think about, well, the fact is Lydia is, Alpha's daughter, and Carol had a daughter. Obviously, she had more children, but obviously, her daughter was more specifically hers. But regardless, that was an interesting situation, especially because it's like, all right, you know what we're going to do? We're going to start cutting off fingers and ears and your teeth. And, that's where Daryl was kind of going down that route. But I was thinking Daryl wasn't really going to do it. I think he was threatening, but it's like that. I don't think Daryl is really up for kind of like the wet work anymore. It doesn't resonate with him anymore. I don't think it ever resonated, but it's just kind of like you got to do what you got to do. But I think that was him just kind of. Daryl's kind of more bark than bite type of situation, at least when it comes to like stuff like that, you know. But then the dude talks about the fact is that like, hey, the fact is that I'm willing to die because Alpha, she's done everything for us. She saved us. She even sacrificed her own daughter. So who am I to like not be willing to sacrifice myself? Which is like, okay, feeding into the thing of like, right. Everyone's under the impression Alpha killed Lydia. It's like she would. How can we not give any less than she is? She sacrificed her own daughter. She killed her own daughter for our sake. You know, so she's willing to go that far. Of course, we all are as well. And so I thought that was and that kind of sparked something. It's like, wait, she said she killed Lydia, which that was kind of interesting. It's also interesting too that he's the one who gathers up the Guardians and stuff like that. I wonder, is it just his job or are there other ones? I guess he's one of the people in patrol, because I feel like you wouldn't leave that job just to one person. I guess you wouldn't be under the impression, because I feel like leaving that for just, well, because that's what Gamma and her sister were supposed to be good at too, so they're kind of in that lane of like people who but I guess he's more so kind of supposed to be the shepherd of like, he keeps them all in one particular area. They are some of the people, like Gamma and her sister were some who helped gather them, but they're not the ones who 100% like rein them in, essentially kind of keep them in one spot like cattle, you know. So but Carol wants to use Lydia like that, which Daryl's kind of gets. He's like, no, don't do that, she's already been through enough. It's like, yeah, but you can't be making choices for her. It's got to be her choice, which is super ironic considering the fact is what Carol ends up doing. But we'll get to, because I'll circle back to that dude in a little bit, but obviously that lead didn't work out because home dude ends up dead. We'll circle back to that. But then, you know, Carol's like, okay, you can still help and everything. And because obviously we have that whole thing at the end with like, because obviously Gamma's being brainwashed by Alpha because she actually is opening up a bit to Aaron. Because I think it's so interesting that out of anyone, Aaron was given that job. And I guess it's hard to say whether it is 100% manipulation or was he trying a different approach of like, because what happened with Lydia, maybe they can't approach other people like that. So I guess like what her job is to kind of like pull Aaron in is kind of what his job was supposed to be. But, you know, it's hard to say whether what's sincere and what's just further manipulation on the battlefield, because he's like, no, we're getting to know each other. He's like, oh, this is a drawing from my daughter. It's like, yeah, one was kind of enough for me. And obviously it hits Gamma because like, right, she had a niece. She even says like, oh, she's an only child, because she's not trying to give any leeway when it came to Aaron. But then it's like, oh yeah, like, oh, my little girl, like she likes to ride around, you know, I think it's an excuse to stay out with her friends and stuff like that. And then she kind of lets in a story of like, you know, as she says, we used to. So it's like little brother or, you know, little sister, because Aaron talks about the fact that he has a little brother and everything, and he's slowly breaking down that wall to the point she got uncomfortable because she ends up leaving. And she goes back to Alpha, and it's like, yeah, it says some of the stuff he talked about, like, oh, he has a daughter and stuff like that, which Alpha's like, that's all you have to report? Because she was so distracted, she couldn't even she couldn't rein in a walker. She ended up having to kill it before he ended up killing her. But now it's a thing of like, okay, and now Alpha's punishing her. It's like, oh, because we go through this punishment to make us stronger. So once again, it just builds the irony, because like you're up here being like, okay with like, you're right, I deserve this punishment, I need to steal my will. And it's like, yeah, which is funny considering the fact is Alpha pushes you all to go down these circumstances, to be willing to make these sacrifices, and she's not even willing to make them herself, because obviously that's something that still hits Gamma, because it's like, I sacrificed my sister, but it's for the greater good. It's for the greater good. And when she tries to attack Aaron later on and sees Lydia, it's like, wait, you're alive? And then it shatters her world, because it's like she literally killed her sister, or at the very least put her sister and indirectly killed her sister by pushing her off of Alpha into a crowd of walkers that ripped her apart. But she saved Alpha because it's like, this is what I believe in when my sister was weak, so whatever sacrifices were necessary, it eats away at me, but at the very least it's like, I have to be strong. it's actually sad too because that baby's still around and everything. So it's like that little bit of her sister that still lives on in her niece and everything. That's still got to be rough to think about too. I mean, that's what drove her sister to the brink of doing that, because it was like, I can't. Like, my baby, I had to sacrifice my baby for, like, that's on a whole other level than, like, you know, it's like you're willing to sacrifice yourself, sure, but it's when she became a parent and that baby became so much more important to her, in the sense of like, your life wasn't just yours to give anymore, it was about your babies. So that's what kind of, that motherly instinct kind of kicked in, hence why, you know, Gamma's sister attacked Alpha. But now I think, like, now it's like everything you did was for nothing, because it's like you killed your sister for nothing, for a cause that, you know, Alpha claimed that, oh, she made a sacrifice by killing her daughter, but nope, she didn't. Her daughter is alive and well. It's like, you got to keep the person that you love and care about alive, but I inadvertently killed them for you. So, and it's basically what, you know, Lydia was talking about. The fact of the matter is, an idea is enough to kind of change everything. All you have to do is show these people that there's something else, to basically make them question Alpha's leadership, you know, which Beta was in the process of, which he still currently is. And let's not forget, Negan's currently working his way through that, which I'm curious to see what that means in the grand scheme of things. But well, because Lydia's like, wait, you knew, you used me, because Carol had made such a point to Daryl of like, oh, let her make her own choice. You didn't give her the information. And she's like, it's okay. It's like, but it's like, no, you want to talk about how bad my mom is. You're just as bad as she is, using me like this. And then she ends up running away. And I think it hits Carol to be like, I used her like that. Like, she is a kid. I did use her, because no matter what circumstances it's because I think there's always going to be a part of Carol that's fine with using her, because it's like, because it was your mom that killed my boy, you know, Henry. And I think, like, she seems like she's okay with Lydia, but for her, you know, like I said, you're willing to use whoever you can. And that's the thing, like, that is an Alpha move. As she literally told you, Alpha, you know, manipulates people into believing what they want to do is their choice. So she kind of manipulates you and be like, okay, you want to help, don't you? Like, because she's looking for everyone in Alexandria's approval, not just everyone, just all three groups. She's looking for their approval. She wants a place to fit in, because she can't never go back. But now she's on her own, which Daryl was kind of told by Michonne she needs to stay there, because if Lydia leaves or something happens to her, that gets rid of their safeguard. That means Alpha will have no excuse but to come after you guys more directly, because it's like, oh, at least Lydia, you know, so strategically, from, you know, which is still sad that even Michonne looks at her like a puzzle piece, and Daryl kind of has to go along with it, but he doesn't want to. And even him and Gabriel have to clean up that dead Whisperer, which even Gabriel was like, no, I'll help you, because this isn't your mess to clean up, you know, which that's a whole thing in itself. So, okay. So then there's that. Then this all kind of, it's interesting how, like, all the plot points kind of lead towards each other. So there's everything with Siddiq this episode, obviously still kind of dealing with everything. Like I said, for him, he wants control. Like, that's why he's so adamant about saving all these people, because he feels like he failed everyone else. You know, it's survivor's remorse. Like, you know, he feels guilty about the fact that he was the only one that survived, and plus everything that he saw. It's kind of like, well, because at first it's like, wait a minute, Dante ended up killing the Whisperer because you gave him hemlock. He's like, yeah, but I didn't pack the bag. You did. So now it's like, okay, so did Siddiq do that subconsciously? Because it's like, oh, this is a Whisperer. The fact is, because even he was like, oh, I know you, meaning he was there that night that Alpha cut off everyone's heads and everything. And so that sent him spiraling. So now you're thinking like, oh, did he subconsciously, like, put Hemlock in there because subconsciously he wanted the guy to die? So it's like, because we know that Siddiq was like sleepwalking and everything, like he was losing time, he was, you know, tripping basically because of just like the nightmares and stuff like that. Like, it was just becoming too much, even to the point he jumps into the water and he's kind of drowning himself in it. Luckily Rosita showed up, which I love that conversation between him and she's like, oh no, you know, it's like, you know, talking about how good and pale she looks, and the fact is that it's like, if it wasn't for Gabriel, I probably could control myself around you. She's like, well, he doesn't have a jealous bone in his body. And it's like, all right, slide over. And she's like, I was thinking about Eugene. And he was like, right, your other man. And it's like, I don't want him to think, I blew him off or whatever. It's like, no, Eugene bounced back. He's probably like one of the few people who was luckily enough to able to bounce back, which you can make an argument about that with everything. I mean, if they were able to kind of remedy that really quickly, be like, yeah, Rosita didn't hit you up because she was sick, but the fact is that's not a top priority, that could lead to some ugly situations later on. But, depending on what that situation with Eugene and that, I'm already blanking on her name. Did she tell him her name last episode? I think she did. But the lady on the radio, it's like, oh, like I'm just waiting for that to turn ugly because I know it's going to. But like I said, we'll ultimately have to wait and see. But Rosita was actually the one that came and saved him, and it's like, talk to me. And for him, it's like, he still feels like he's back there. Like, he can't close his eyes without feeling like he's trapped there. He feels powerless because especially the people he cared about, Tara, Enid, and just all those people died, and it's like, I did nothing but just sit there, which I'm blanking on it. And this kind of made me think, Rosita wasn't there during the whole Negan thing, was she? I don't think she was. I know Sasha was, but I don't think Rosita was, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember. That's the problem. It's been a while. If you let me know in the comments, I'll most likely end up looking at it there, but I'll probably look it up on my own. But I'm trying to remember if she was there or not, because that was a similar circumstance of like, that's probably a story he probably doesn't know. I don't know if anyone's told him that, about like everyone lined up and how many people they lost. Abraham and they lost Glenn. Nobody could do anything. Hell, Glenn died because Daryl did something, So I think that's something to kind of keep in mind. But, she didn't bring that up. That's why because I was like, why didn't she bring that up? I guess it's because, like, I think she wasn't there. Sasha was, but I don't think I know definitely Sasha was, but I don't think she was there, so. But regardless, I just thought that was, it's a similar circumstance, a more indirect circumstance. But, for her, it's like, the fact of the matter is, you got your daughter, you got me. There's so many people that love you and care about you. You basically don't have to carry this burden alone. That you don't have to deal with these things alone, and I like that Rosita is being there for him. I think I like the shift that Rosita's character has had, because I don't think who she was at the beginning, she was like the very, like, I don't know, having moments like this, I feel like you wouldn't have necessarily seen Rosita that we got introduced to all those years ago be that person, but all her experiences, all that she's been through, all that she's gained, all that she's lost, it shifts the person. And I think it's just kind of crazy to think, like, yeah. And it's still in the back of my mind. Every time I see her, I'm just like, Susie Crabgrass. That just still, like, trips me out. I can't help it. I always feel bad because, like, when you see actors and know them for one specific thing, it just always sticks in the back of your head. So anytime I see her, I'm like, Susie Crabgrass. I lose my mind every time. But regardless of that. But then Siddiq starts thinking, like, okay, what's the commonality? You guys don't stay in the same place. You don't eat the same thing. Even I was starting to think, like, does it have nothing to do with the water? Because we do know that, like, Homegirl is, like, blocking up the water. And it seems like, is there a reason for that? And now, in the grand scheme of things, I think there is. Because it was, like, drying up the water, so you'd be forced to use. But then it was like, okay. So then I started thinking, like, wait, did Siddiq, like, because I think in his state of mind, because he's the one who kept giving people more and more of that tainted water. And it was like, and I think he was thinking, like, because I'm the one that was doing it, not realizing it ahead of time, I made everyone even sicker. That lady, Cheryl, ended up dying, even though he promised, like, I'm going to take care of you and everything. And she was like, I accepted my fate, but everyone needs you to be in good health so you can take care of them. So I think that just makes him feel even more guilty about, like, man, all these people died. And you have Dante being there for him. It's like, yeah, man, it's okay. And then that moment, that twist of, like, him remembering, and it's like, I was like, Dante's a whisperer. How the hell did you pull that off? And the fact is, you're a medical expert too. How'd you pull? I mean, I guess he was a doctor beforehand, and it's like, I mean, it depends on how long he's been with the Whisperer. So, like, if he was with them for a long, I think some of that you never get rid of, even with just basic meaning medical training. I think that's enough to kind of stick in your head. So, it's like he remembers Dante was there that night. So that was interesting. It's like, wait, what? And then before he could, they turned to a scuffle. And it's sad because even Dante's like, I didn't want things to end like this. Because I think the time he spent with Sadiq is actually, like, I think a lot of the heart-to-hearts they had was real. But because he's so dedicated in that, does he not know that Lydia's alive? Or did he not know that that's a thing? Like, they had to have crossed paths at some point, right? Well, especially if she got beat up. The episode before last, like, even after all that, you know, so that's why I'm kind of like, maybe he's unaware that she, like, made that whole thing about, like, made that whole proclamation to her people about that, because he was probably already, like, deep undercover by that point. I don't know. Whatever the case may be, he is choking Sadiq out. So the question is, did he kill Sadiq or did he just knock him out? I hope he didn't kill Sadiq. That would suck if he did, just because that would mean that I don't know, like, he's got too much to live for now, and everyone needs him, especially if Dante's the bad guy. But now it kind of makes sense. That's what I was talking about, because in the grand scheme, I was like, oh, is that connected to everything that, you know, Gamma was doing, blocking up the river and everything? But now in retrospect, I'm like, okay, so if that's the case, maybe the point was so to make them keep using their own water. Well, no, because the water was tainted because they kept throwing it in there, but no one probably knew that they were still drinking it. Well, because Aaron was there, but I guess you would assume he would be reporting back that. I don't know what to make of it. Or did he taint? Because the water they're getting, like, it's coming from that water that he was just in, right? That Sadiq was in. Or is it from the river, hence why they're blocking it up? I thought it was just to kind of dry them out from getting water, but maybe it was also to help with this whole other side of the conspiracy of attacking, of getting all these people sick. Whatever the case may be, quite an interesting way to end the episode. So, I believe next week's episode is the mid-season finale, right? So, I'm curious to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into all of that. And now moving on to this week's episode of Watchmen, a great episode. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I do appreciate that this episode was a very Wade-focused episode, and I like that it gives us context and understanding, for one, why he is a looking glass, what that whole situation represents. I like that there's meaning to the mask. It isn't just like, oh, I decided to look. It's like, no, there's meaning to it. Even the fact is that he's connected to what, I guess, I don't know if they've given it a name, like how in, like, Avenger in the MCU it's known as the blip. I'm wondering, is it kind of called like the event? Well, no, I forgot. They call it 11-2. All right. So that's really fascinating. Kind of getting that other perspective, learning that he was like a Jehovah's Witness, and the fact of the matter is he was in Hoboken at the time. And I guess in my mind, because I'm more familiar with the movie, I thought it was like, you know, the giant squid exploded. No, it sent out a psychic wave that killed a whole bunch of people. I was like, that's interesting. And I guess if you were fortunate enough you survived, I guess it's just kind of depending on where you were, because I guess because he was on the inside, because when he walks out, there's a few people that were outside too. Like either they had just walked out to it, ended up surviving. I mean, even though you were inside, it still hit, because, like, you know, Wade's ears were bleeding. It's so sad too, because there's that whole thing of like, because obviously this is, you know, during the events of Watchmen, so it's like, oh, we're on the cusp of nuclear war at any minute right now. So obviously it's like, this is the end of days essentially, and he meets this woman, but it's like, oh, you're a virgin, you don't want to kind of, you know, before the end, you want to get fucked before the end, right? She ends up stripping him naked and taking his clothes off. Poor bastard. But to know, like, he was in a house of mirrors at the time, and I'm like, okay, so there's the whole looking glass situation. And I guess that kind of played itself into who he is. The fact is that he has kind of trust issues. So for him, he's always seeking the truth, which he even made a job out of that because he's a market researcher. And I love it. It's like, oh, these people are like, oh, yeah, so many people are excited to go back to New York. He's like, as a, you know, no cold-blooded Oklahoma man's going to admit when they're afraid. Because the fact of the matter is, no one's going to want to go back to New York. And I think little details like that is so interesting. It makes you wonder, how do people in New York feel? People are like, oh, would you be willing to relocate to New York? Oh, sure, of course. It's like, no, because no one would, some people aren't afraid to admit they're afraid. But it's like, that's such an interesting little detail that, obviously it's been 30 years, but you don't get over psychic dimensional squid popping out of nowhere, killing millions of people. Like, that would shake you to your core. That is like some very, and I think obviously you can make real life comparisons, to the 11/2 situation to 9/11, and I think obviously that's the correlation that they're kind of at least kind of trying to make, so. Something like that shakes people to their core. Like, I think even here in real life, after the events, there's still that instinct fear of like, man, that could happen again. And so that's what everyone lives in fear. Some more so than others live in fear of, like, especially someone like Wade, who was there. He wasn't directly in New York, but he was close enough for the psychic wave to hit, so I think that in itself speaks volumes of his circumstances. And just the fact is, like I said, like, he lives in truth because he refused to, I guess, be lied to again. But it's like, if he wasn't probably where he was inside that house of mirrors, he'd probably be dead right now. And obviously that probably puts you in a very existential crisis. It's interesting too. I love that we continue to see how much Laurie's kind of an asshole. I love that. And it's like, oh yeah, I bugged your cactus. He's like, wait, what? She's like, yeah, don't be fair. That's what the FBI do. We bug people. And then the fact is, it's like, oh yeah, mirror guy. And he's like, I know it's Looking Glass, but like I said, she's just an asshole. And she's like, you can go, mirror guy. He's about to pull down his mask. He's like, motherfucker. I love that look on his face, like, because it's like, stop treating me like shit. But Laurie's doing it because she's really good. I think that's the point of just pushing people's buttons, because like, when you push people's button, you see how they react. I think that's kind of her whole thing, to really kind of see what people, how they handle things. So I just thought that was such a little fascinating aspect. And we even learned, like, it's like reflecting. It's basically because, and it's like I said, this episode's so great with the little details. Like, the fact of the matter, it's not even a little detail, it's a big detail, is there's an extra dimensional security place. They sell, like, the stuff that he wears, his mask. It's supposed to prevent psychic attacks. I'm like, that's what that meant. Yeah. I was like, that's so interesting. Even the fact is, he has it sewn into his hat, because he tried to make it seem like, nah, I was there, but I sleep just fine. And it's like, nope. Because right afterwards, he joined the police force fairly, like, a year after, 11/2. So it's like, I guess for him, it's a situation of, he just wasn't, at the very least, if he could, well, no, 'cause it wasn't 11/2 that he, well, it's it, or was it he joined the military? He joined something that night, and then, no, it was after White Night, he ended up joining the cops. It's like an excuse to wear a mask. But really quickly, it is interesting to know that there's literally an entire business based around extra dimensional security. I guess after an event like that, it's enough to kind of like, oh, you make bank, which I guess is almost ironic in the grand scheme of things, because like, you as the audience know it's bullshit, but no one else in the world does. So that's, it was probably started with sincerity, but it's just ironic because, we as the audience know the circumstances around, like, the squid attacking and everything like that. So it just makes that situation ironic in a sense. And even the fact is, like, Wade even has his own little support group where people, and it was really interesting, especially that one dude talking where it's like, he wasn't born until like 10 years afterwards. But the fact of the matter is, like, he was saying that there's certain things that can kind of be passed down genetically. So his mom's fear kind of went to him, even though, like, he was never around during, 11/2. So I thought that was such an interesting circumstance to kind of hear, that, like, the fact is, even though you weren't directly there, to be fair, and I think that's a thing of just kind of like, even if you don't experience something to know, like, the great tragedy that was there, it can still resonate and hit you, because, for them, it's like, that was 30 years ago. That's in the grand scheme of all of time, that's not a very long period of time, so I think that was just kind of like a fascinating thing to think about. What I thought was interesting was the I'm blanking on her name, but it's the lady met this episode. She was also at the support group. Interestingly enough, and just the timing is interesting, that's the actress who played Abby in Ray Donovan, which I lose my mind when I'm hearing her talking this, because I'm so used to her as Abby, because in Ray Donovan she has such a heavy ass Boston accent, wicked smart, type of accent. But also what tripped me out is because she also popped up in Krypton, which is interesting DC connection there. Obviously, Watchmen being DC and everything. So I love that being a little connection there. I think that's kind of fascinating. It's actually interesting because she was only in the first episode of Krypton, but she played Seg's mom. If you're unfamiliar with Krypton, Seg is Superman's grandfather, so making her Superman's great grandmother. So I just think it's just a fascinating turn of events. But it's just interesting hearing her have because I'm pretty sure she's Irish if I'm not mistaken. So obviously I figured she was putting on an accent for Ray Donovan, but to hear her put one on for this, I'm going on a tangent. But once again, if you're unaware, I get nuts about accents. I love accents; they're amazing. But regardless, because she has a British one during Krypton, so that's what kind of tripped me out. I didn't, So, but regardless, I like the fact is that she kind of talked because Wade has this whole thing about you're going to basically trying to help people that there is an end to it because we're all in the tunnel, but at the end of the tunnel is light. And it was actually kind of a very sweet thing because the sad thing is, and it's something like the lady had talked about, Wade wasn't completely out of the tunnel. The fact of the matter is even the fact is waiting, because even the guy was multiple times I called the extra dimensional security, but I hung up. At least I'm not one of those crazy who were reflecting or kind of give them my money and everything, which is sad because Wade is one of those quote unquote crazy. So there's that whole situation. It was interesting to hear them kind of, sit down, Wade and her to sit down and talk. And she talks about the fact is, apparently Spielberg made a movie called Pale Horse, which I didn't look into that, whether that's a real thing or not. I think it's just interesting to use a real director's name to be maybe it has different correlations. If it's a real movie, like I said, I didn't look into it. I figured it had to be BS. Really quickly, I did look it up. I should have figured as much because I figured because obviously what the nature of the movie's about, of course, it wouldn't be real, but I was just wondering if they took something he really made and just applied it to this. But to be fair, once again, this is an alternate history, but it's just interesting to know that they took a real life director and made up a movie. I mean, it happens, but it's interesting when it does happen. But regardless, the fact is for her, it's the movie made her feel better. It's kind of one of the few things that does. And so for her, it's the fact of the matter is, I don't know why no one else is freaking out. Because it's why is it? And that is something to think about. Why is it only a select few people really worry about it? It's when squids are raining down from the sky, it's we see the people pull over and they turn on their wipers and everything, almost like it's a normal thing. So she's so why are people not freaking out all the time? And it's that is kind of an interesting thing that people have just kind of accepted it. It's just kind of a thing. I thought it was kind of fascinating. And like I said, it kind of explains, why Wade is as obsessed with the Squidfall as much as he is, So it is just kind of fascinating. Even the fact is, even though he claims that, no, I sleep perfectly at night, even though, he, has his little bunker, he has his little emergency thing sounding off and stuff like that, showing that he is still basically living in fear because of this whole situation. I mean, why wouldn't you? And what he was saying about those guys during the focus marketing testing applies to him as well. He's not willing to admit that he's afraid. We even hear this, because I think it's just because Wade always exists in truth and stuff like that. And I guess for him, it's always he's almost always waiting for the other shoe to drop in many different regards, in a very literal sense, because obviously, he he's always waiting for the big one. He even told Angela so the other episode. What I also thought was kind of fascinating was kind of the situation with him and his wife. He ends up visiting her and everything. And there's a whole conversation about for 7 years she had to try to convince him she wasn't going to just take all his clothes and leave. And then he's like, oh, 7 years of bad luck, because he remembers the mirrors breaking all those years ago, which is like, I would have not even thought about that whole 7 years bad luck thing. It's especially in correlation to her saying that if they hadn't cut that together like that. So I thought that was kind of pretty neat. In his mind, it's kind of like, it's just kind of bound to, because she's saying like, why you always end up getting mixed up with bad ladies who are just going to basically kick you in the nuts, you know? And so, which it turns out, it ends up being, I had a feeling, I was like, don't tell me like the lady he meets is going to end up being Cavalry. I was like, oh, don't let that be the case. And it turns out she totally is. I was like, oh, I'm like, of course she is. So he tracks them down and they're doing something with like a teleporter and stuff like that. And it's like, whoa, what the hell are they up to? But it turns out the entire thing was a trap. It's like, oh, we purposely led you here, Wade. We're not trying to kill you or anything. And then the big reveal of Keen, obviously, I guess he was connected to the Cavalry. I figured that whole like thing at Judd's funeral was BS. I just wasn't expecting him to actually be not only part of the Cavalry, also its leader. That was kind of really fascinating to me. So for him, and I even love that line before he had went in there being like, you big dummy. Of course you can pick him, because he called himself a dummy before because of the girl who basically took his clothes all those years ago. So it was kind of like Cynthia was kind of right about you always picking the lady that's going to kick you in the balls. But what was really interesting is learning like Keen's explanation of like, basically he was not, I'm still thinking he's on that lane of white supremacy. Maybe, because for him it's like, oh, he came here to run the Cavalry, because for him it's like, oh, I've never hurt anyone. So that White Knight stuff, that wasn't him. He came here after that had already happened. So basically it's like, oh, his friend Judd, they both worked to kind of keep the peace. That's why the Cavalry stuff was the way it was. Like there was like 3 years of peace, because he was keeping the Cavalry in check and Judd was keeping the police in check. There's like this balance that was kept in, Tulsa all this time because of that. And so I thought that was such a fascinating little detail. But that's why I'm kind of like, well, we know Judd had a cult, so maybe he was a recovering racist or recovering Klansman, and maybe Keen is one too, which is, kind of scary to, it's just crazy. Like, because he never explicitly says that, but because we see Judd had a white hood, it kind of makes you go, so Keen might had one too. I mean, that's what the Cavalry has become, symbol of. Essentially, they're looked at as just kind of bigots and racist type of situation, so. But then Keen was like, I'm going to show you something. I'm going to open your eyes so that you never have to, you gain true freedom. I was like, do you have proof about the squid thing? And it's like, you do, don't you? And he totally does. I was like, holy crap. Side note, did I mention that earlier? I don't remember. I think I might have mentioned that. I think I mentioned it earlier. I was curious if we were actually going to see the squid. I'm actually super surprised they showed the squid. I was kind of hoping for it, but it's like, lo and behold, they showed it. Like I said, I don't remember if I brought that up at the beginning of the recording or not. It was kind of flashing in my head right now. So I'm like, if I didn't, oh well, looks like I double dipped in this recording. Like, regardless. But that was just in the back of my mind. I figured I'd go ahead and say it just in case I didn't say it earlier in the recording. But nevertheless, I liked the fact it's this recording that Adrian had made, because he is potentially the smartest man alive. So he set a recording that was going to be sent to like, oh, Redford, I knew that you were going to become the president. It's basically been 7 years. So let me tell you what I did. And kind of basically almost kind of like a supervillain monologuing your villainous act. But to be fair, this situation is a little different because you monologuing it after the fact. And that's really interesting to know that there are people obviously in the government and stuff like that who are able to get their hands on this information, who, there's people who are in the know. Because I was curious, like, how many people would actually ever know? Because I figured only the Watchmen would be the ones who knew. That'd be kind of a deep, dark secret that they ended up keeping. But it's like, no, a couple more people know the truth. So I thought that was kind of like a fascinating aspect to it too. And now Wade knows the entire truth of like, oh, you don't have to worry about that attack ever happening again, because it was a one-off situation, and it was meant to instill fear, to be because even Wade had talked about it. If it wasn't for that squid attacking, we would have all been reduced to ash, because it would have led to nuclear war. So I just thought that was just, that was a perspective he already had, and it shook him to his core. I didn't even like this element that even when it's all said and done at the end of the episode, like he had his extra dimensional security, it showed up and he throws it in the trash. But then he walks back. So showing that Wade isn't completely free, that there is still, to be fair, it's 30 years of fear that you just can't just get over, even with knowing the truth, because I think there's going to be that part of your brain, because obviously his whole thing is reading people, is knowing the truth. So that, of course, would be something that you can't quite shake, So even as someone who delves into the truth, it's still there somewhere in his mind of like, but maybe just in case someone else does decide to do the same thing again years later. I am curious what their plan is, because he was like, are you going to drop another squid? He's like, no, that'd be unoriginal. We've got our own plan. So it's like, maybe they're trying to do a similar thing. Maybe this has something to do with exposing the truth to everyone. It is kind of sad how the episode kind of ends in the regard of like, you have Wade betraying Angela. He knew that obviously the cactus was bugged, so he got her to kind of confess that like, oh, the pills are her grandfather's and everything. And he apologized. She's like, why? But obviously, for him, he was trying to do the right thing, because King made it clear. It's like, either you kind of get Angela out of the way, kind of get Lori to kind of look her way, so we can finish up whatever the hell it is we're doing. Just because if you don't do that and Angela kind of stays in the way, we're just going to kill her and her family. So Wade was trying to do the right thing by looking out for her, even if it meant betraying her. So that's a whole complicated mess, which we did find out from Cynthia what those pills were. They're called nostalgia. Basically, they're literally memories in a pill. And I guess maybe that's Will's way to make sure that his memories like stay somewhere. Like, I guess in case he needs to remember. I wonder how that works. Maybe the pills are certain labeled of like, oh, this pill contains these certain amount of memories or whatever. I wonder if they kind of categorize like that or what. But maybe it's just in case he ever gets captured. It's like, oh, I'm not BSing. I actually don't know the answer because my memories are literally in these pills. Whatever the case may be, I'm sure things are going to get rough for Angela because she literally downed the entire bottle. So that's probably going to send her brain into overdrive. So she's probably going to remember so much stuff that Will remembered or went through or experienced. So that's definitely going to be interesting. Then there's another aspect to this whole episode where we got the whole situation with Adrian. I did like the correlation of like, while Wade was learning the truth, it cuts to what Adrian is up to. And we see he's in the final stage of his experiment. So he ends up flinging himself on the catapult. He bursts through and it's like, okay, so you're on another planet. Is that the moon or something? And then like he starts laying, and then we kind of see, I was like, okay, all these dead bodies. It's like of the clones and stuff like that. The Mr. Phillips and the Mrs. Crowshank. So it's like, okay, so what's the purpose of this? And then he starts piling them up. I'm like, what is he? You're making a message, and then the message, and he's waiting for, things to line up. And it's like, okay, so a satellite passes and says the message, save me. And it says something else, but it doesn't, we only see the first letter and it says D. So it's like, okay, so what the hell is that about? So he did say, as we know, he was on a prison. He was like, yeah, this is supposed to be a paradox. That basically for the past 4 years he's been in a prison. So it's like, who locked him in here? And it's like, oh, you're God. Well, because obviously they end up pulling him back, because basically it seems like a camouflage thing of like that entire place is kind of camouflaged on potentially the moon. So it's like, okay, so and he referred, because it turns out the game warden he's wearing a mask, but just by the sound and looks, it looks like another Mr. Phillips clone. So it's like, oh, your God abandoned you, which I'm like, well, we know how powerful he is. The only powerful being in existence. It's like that. So I'm like, did Mr. Manhattan make that? Did he make that prison for prison of sorts for Adrian? I was like, it's interesting. I wonder, because he doesn't seem like he cares about humanity. So maybe it's just because maybe it was a means to an end. I guess maybe Adrian reached out or something to him that kind of made that. I don't know what that is about. I think we'll kind of learn more about it in the future. But it seems like not all the clones are servant to him, because it seems like obviously this Mr. Phillips ends up kicking Adrian in the face, and being like, oh, there will be consequences. So I'm curious to see what the hell that ends up being. So I'm very interested to kind of find out the details of that, because obviously, like I said, he was free reign apparently before then. So why is he, because like I said, he was under the impression it was a paradise. So it's like, it had to be a thing of like, oh, Dr. Manhattan gave him like a place to call his own, but now it's like, oh, I'm trapped here because you're purposely keeping me trapped here. Are you trying to, once again, Dr. Manhattan doesn't care enough about humanity. So why would he do that? Not unless he has some ulterior motives. I mean, that's the problem. Dr. Manhattan can see the future, so he knows kind of everything. So maybe this is all for some grand purpose. Obviously, we still haven't seen yet, which he has, which I'm interested to dive into that. There are so many questions I have about all of that. So I'm curious to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good